thanks for reaching out. It's my understanding, chat a little bit about the testing proposal, or is there anything else you wanted to chat about, or is it focused on that? The
Yeah,
testing?
no, I think testing's the thing that we, it's kind of on everybody's mind. It's interesting. So since our last meeting, social media, a lot of different conversations going on, whether it was mainly on Instagram. I mean, that seems to be the spot where most people, do their communications in this industry for sure. And, it's tricky, Eric, because, from where I sit as a store operator originally, right? So I started out as a store operator and then recognized that, needed to get into the cultivation side for sure, right?
Yeah.
So from the store perspective, I've always been someone who wanted to make sure the product was tested, just to make sure that when it went out the door to the patients, for a lot of reasons, right? And, you always want to take people at their word. So I always want to be careful how I phrase things. But let's just say that, when I tested some of the product, it wasn't what people said it was, right? And sometimes they don't know. And that's been my biggest concern. And that's the part that I think is hard right now in this environment, because every word has a trigger to it, right? So people are, right? So, we know the trigger words, it's testing, it's tracking, it's regulations, all those words create triggers. And although I grasp why people feel that way, I also think it's in the best interest of our patients and of the industry to make sure that we have, validity behind what we're doing, right? That products are safe and tested. And the dilemma that goes out there on the social media side has been, I don't want to say misinformation, because I think any information is good information. I just think it's sometimes hard for everyone to filter through it, right? So, for people to say that, you can just see mold and that therefore that should be the test, right? Like, to say that you're a clean grower, I talked about this at the last work group that, we've tested multiple, we test everything, right? But just for example, this new facility, since we've been in here, we've tested about 23 different strains. So through different harvests, right? Different batches. And one out of those 23 failed for microbials. So first of all, one would say, okay, you are what you say you are. You grow clean, you have good practices, great. But guess what? One failed. So this is where it gets really hard for me when people are, they make the comments, trust the grower. Well, yeah, people should trust us, right? We're following a really strong protocol to make sure we grow clean, but things happen. And that's why I get concerned from a business owner, from a patient advocate, and from just wanting to make sure that I never put a product out there that could cause harm to someone. So the question is with all that being said, how do you roll it out? There's so much resistance. I was surprised. Not from the patients. It almost seems like all the patients want testing.
Yeah, that's the part that really strikes home with me as obviously a regulator here in this space. Like, I understand the importance of testing and we advocate for patient health and consumer health on the other side. There's a lot of unknowns where you rather be safe than sorry and incorporate certain types of panels or analyte testing. But when you hear the three patients, particularly two of the patients that are like, this is a must, this is a no-brainer. Right. In the mission that we kind of established for this working group, and what we should be doing without this working group or without a mission is like, this should be a patient-centric program. And when the majority of them, if not all of them on the working group are like, we need testing, that's who we should be listening to. And we're hoping with the proposal, understanding that it is a change in the way that the program has functioned for over a decade now, that we're doing it in a way that's going to mitigate any types of operational impacts or raising costs. So I get it. It's a fine line to walk, but yeah, I agree. It definitely has a lot of value when patients advocate and put a voice to it.
For sure. And you think about like, the example I gave you, right, where we've tested 23 different strains, one failed. We understand why. It's a strain that had a lot of density to it. It was, but I've had the thing that was also interesting. I've had a lot of growers reach out to me, and a lot of people don't want to go out in the social media forums, right, because it can be a tough environment. I've taken my blows in the last, let's just say last week or so. But I thought it was important still to try to engage with the community, because I think that, just because I have an opinion doesn't mean that that's the right opinion, right? It just means it's my opinion. And so I felt it was important to talk with, as many people as I could on these spots. And I think the biggest concerns, so if we take the mindset that we know that we want to put out a clean product, we want our patients safe. All right, but I don't believe anyone will argue that. The question next becomes, okay, these are the points that some of the caregivers made to me. The first was, okay, great. Do you know that the labs can handle the volume, right? So, if there's an X amount of time to turn around and test the product, number one, can the labs handle it? Do we have enough labs? Are the SOPs in place that we can make that happen? Okay, that's one point that I believe is very valid, right?
Yep.
Another point that, and I will say, Eric, I feel very strongly on is, if we're going to be transparent and really have testing, pesticides may be one of the biggest keys that is being omitted right now, even on the adult use side. And you have to think of it from the community standpoint, right? A lot of these people and individuals who are in this industry come from apprehension at times to regulations, right? And for reasons that I respect. Okay, so when we take those apprehensions, then how do we make sure that we're showing, and that the industry is showing, that we're moving forward in a way that isn't designed to put them out of business? Okay. And so the first thing that, I kind of got feedback on from a lot of, and I'll say respectable growers and people who feel strongly about the community was, okay, Dave, but you're kind of full of it a little bit if you're going to say, let's support testing and getting clean medicine out, but we're not testing for pesticides. So I think that's important. I'll say that. Very important. And I don't know, I embarrassed to say it, I don't know if I have a good response on why we're not testing that on the adult use side yet, right? Maybe that's something that would be helpful just to share. Because that's something I don't really fully grasp myself.
Yeah, so part of that's obviously the last panel that we've rolled out, which can be the trickiest one. And we're still in the process of formalizing a relationship with the Board of Pesticide Control, because at the end of the day, they're the experts and they'll need to be a partner in this venture, and to get our feet underneath us. Once we have those T's crossed and I's dotted with the Department of Agriculture and the Board of Pesticide Control, is when we would give the labs the go ahead to get certified. And then obviously the way that we've approached bringing on these additional analyte types is giving the industry side 60 days to do R&D to get themselves into a place where they're ready for it. But I would say we're probably, that's the next step, and we're working towards it right now. So we're going to be bringing that online, I would say early springtime of next year. So it would be well in advance of whenever we turn that on in medical. And the part that I go back and forth, I totally agree with you. From what we've seen, that should be a top priority as far as testing is concerned. But everybody talks about costs, and that's obviously it's the most expensive of the panels.
It is. No, that's
so
right.
Try to figure out how to do that appropriately, and was in our proposal about the delayed implementation. So we're going to start testing for these panels, which we have data that we know there's a certain failure rate on AU. We know they're prevalent in medical from testimony that we have from our patients and others. And we'll cover the cost from the state perspective when we do the audit sampling to test for that stuff before it gets turned on. But there's only so much we could get to. I don't know if there's an appetite to kind of turn them on simultaneously or not. I just want to make sure that we're doing it in a smart way. Again, to your point, doing it in a way, regulating a way that we're protecting patient health. But allowing some flexibilities for these businesses to keep their doors open to do what they're doing, because we need them there. So
big time. And that's the piece. And so, it's such a balancing act, right? And that's where, like, we did a lot of R&D, right? So, before we were testing for a long time and making sure that, our soils and things of those natures weren't going to cause problems for the heavy metals and things of that nature. And I just am concerned, and this is the tough part, right? Because making the statement that we need to be careful in how we implement for our caregivers is 100% true, but at the same time, what about all the patients that may be getting product that's contaminated? I mean, it's a really,
it's a bad spot to be.
Like, of all, and at times, Eric, I look at it and I don't ever like to be someone to speak on the, I'm not sure of the right term. There's a word for it, but it may be much worse than we think.
From our perspective and what we've seen, like yes. I mean, there's the two buckets when you're talking about pesticide testing. Obviously, the one that we're most concerned with is blatant use, which would be great to get rid of it. Like, I get it. Anyway, from a cultivating standpoint and a practice, space equals money, and this is a way to address some of those issues. But from environmental factors too, like, I would hope that people would want to know, and OMP in particular, the Board of Pesticide Control being that resource to help registrants figure that out if it was ever to pop on a test. So I mean, we know that it's blatantly used. We see it on the compliance side frequently. It would just be nice, like you said, I mean, we're only able to get to a fraction of those participating in the program, just kind of understand how much out there is ending up in the hand of patients and visiting patients is, I mean, it's unsettling.
It's unsettling. And the hard part is, and I respect some of the folks on our work group, where they've said, well, where's the data to show this and that? And I understand the question, but then there's also just the face value of things, right? Where we do know, right? We know that, you have to, there's a reality there, just from, like you said, from the AU testing, right? That's folks that are willingly seen if there's hits and stuff, because they're trying to make sure that they're ready for it, right?
Right.
So go ahead.
I mean, my biggest question, and I think the only way to do this, both from a policy perspective, but also a political perspective, is like, so our proposal, I mean, do you support the idea, like, if it's sold on a dispensary store shelf or a caregiver store shelf, that's really a commercial transaction. That's where the bulk of the sales are going to come in. So your biggest bang for your buck is to make sure that those products are tested. But if I'm a small caregiver kind of operating in the more traditional arena, where I'm based out of my home, I service a handful of patients, that not being tested is probably where we're going to need to come down, I would imagine, if we were to get anywhere with this. But to me, am I right in my assumptions? And I could be totally wrong. And I've asked people this before, but like, your most at-risk patients, do they go to would they go to a retail store, or would they operate with that smaller caregiver? And then you're like, those are the people that would probably most need testing, you think? So it's like a catch-20. It's so,
what I would think, and I'm just going to put this out to you, that might, so obviously we have to go into this, the industry has to be receptive of this. Clearly cost is important, but I think all of us recognize that, I put a post out that, one of the labs here in Maine, if we followed the initial recommendations of OMP for what would be tested, right, the panels, it was $95. So per strain, based on it, obviously, if we follow the AU rules, right? So hard to say that that's going to cause anyone a real smack, right, from a cost perspective. I mean, a lot of these nutrients and things that people are using are a lot more money than that. So I'm not sure that really holds a lot of validity, other than the growers that grow a lot of strains. Okay.
Right.
That's when and I understand that. Like, a lot of the small growers will grow, say they have, I'm just going to say the plant count, I think, what is it, 30 to whatever people who do the plant count.
Yep.
They might grow one plant or one strain per light, right? If they go on a bigger plant model. And now all of a sudden you're talking about, I get it. Like, I respect that. So my thought might be, and it was talked about on some of the IG forums back and forth. I'd like to say they were all friendly towards me, but maybe not all. Was potentially, if you ease into it and we required though, and this is, I feel very strongly product should be tested that goes out on a shelf, but with a capital B, what if it was mandatory that if it wasn't tested, there was a really aggressive label on that packaging that said this product is not tested?
I support that 100%. And I think we would move forward with a policy like that, specifically because of the patient transparency.
Yeah, there you go.
At the very least,
right.
They should know. If you want to say they should have the opportunity to buy stuff that's not tested, at least let them know. That's one of the most common misconceptions in our program, and we hear it all the time.
Yeah,
that patients, I don't know if you hear that on the same at the same rate we do, but okay. Yeah.
No, we do. I mean, and just the interesting thing I think we mentioned in the work group was anyone from the outside looking in, when they hear there's a medical program in Maine and an adult use program in Maine, and they hear the adult use is tested and the medical's not, I've never spoken to anyone who said, wow, that makes sense, Dave. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Very early on when I was talking to my colleagues, well, before we even launched adult use, they would be
they don't even understand.
Yeah.
Let me give that one a big pause. Okay. Yeah, I don't follow. So, but there you go. So, and I think that's the piece. So like where I sit, I think that might be an easier pill to swallow for the community, is to say, okay, let's, ease into it. But number one, we're here for patients. So if we're really here for patients, let's make sure patients never, ever have the question whether they know what's really happening behind the scenes. Because, I mean, Eric, there's companies out there that literally put their THC content of their strains on their packaging. Like, first of all, and I will say this for the record, in flower, THC percentage is a pretty variant. It's a variable, right? So sometimes I'll test my flower, it'll swing from 24% to 28%, like literally in different batches, different.
Yeah.
So I do respect when, caregivers make the statement, well, THC testing isn't accurate. Well, it's accurate to a point. But again, if I took my highest number and just put it on a label and say that's what it is every time, that's not transparent, right? That's not real.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess my thought would be is, I'm supportive, of course, of the testing side from the program's perspective. But I think as it gets rolled out, there almost needs to be that label. I think that label really will ease a lot of this apprehension. And then, to be frank with you, and we just pay attention to what we do, but we're very busy. And we're told that people come to our locations because they know that there's the results. They know that it's tested and they can see it, right? So if you don't want to test, okay. But I mean, I think over the time, that's not the best policy.
So are you saying even for caregivers who operate a storefront that they should have that opportunity not to test as long as they have the big red label?
I would. That's how I would roll it out. I think, and I'm not saying that's, let me be clear. I'm not saying that I, Dave Vickers, want that product on my shelf. Okay.
Right.
But I also think there could be some sense to that from the community standpoint. And then after that, everything takes time. I mean, I can remember, Eric, years ago when we opened these caregiver storefronts, and they were not, the kind that were rotating patients, right? Originally there was the 5 cards and people were opening stores and rotating patients. I don't remember if it was LD 1539 or whichever it was. I think it was 18 when that finally took place. But so someone like myself could open a storefront and take, patients who came through the door as long as they had the proper certifications. There was a huge outcry in the community that storefronts were not doing things, that this was not what cannabis was about and whatnot. As time has gone on, storefronts have become a very nice place in the community for people. And the caregivers, now that they can wholesale 100%, I mean, to me, that's a big deal for all these folks. You want to be a small farmer and do your thing. I mean, grow great product, get it tested, come see me, show me the results. And I couldn't be more excited to have it on my shelf, right? So all this takes time, and with a community that is apprehensive from the start on just about anything. And again, I respect those reasons. That said, I think that might start it out in a better light for a lot of folks. It's better than what we have. It's better than what we have right now, Eric. Straight up.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay. I mean, just, and then leave it up to the store owner. I mean, and really, and as time goes on, I think, it might, maybe for the folks that are nervous that haven't tested enough, it will allow them to start, okay, geez, if I want to be in this storefront or that storefront, those particular storefronts want it tested. This is what I need to do. And we'll just alone through that, some things would get, sort of sorted out.
Yeah. And just to make sure that I go back to it, I mean, the first point you brought up with the concern out there was capacity. With 3 state certified, 4 on the way, we could bring on the entire medical program and quadruple the adult use and still have capacity within the system. Okay. So we've checked that box.
Make sure that is really well presented, right? When that time comes, that you've done that research and that it can really be presented that way, because what's going to happen the first time there's 3 caregivers that are waiting. We both know. Yeah. So that's great to hear. No, that's something I can comfortably pass on to people. The pesticide thing, I would, if there's a way that you can get out in front of that one a little bit, and just communicate, however that can be. And I realize, for the record, you're in a tough spot. There's a lot of pieces that move behind these scenes to get things to roll the way they need to. Mm-hmm. But that would be one that just, it will bring more validity, because again, it's an important one for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Well, this has been incredibly helpful. I appreciate it.
No, I do too.
Anything else you want to chit chat about?
No, let's just have a wonderful end of this year. And then I'm just excited about 2022. I think it's going to be a very special year for the industry. I really do.
Hope so. Should be good things.
And I will say this, just for the record, you and your team have done a really nice job in this whole process, listening to all of us, right? There's a lot of personalities, a lot of opinions, and we appreciate it. I mean, I think it's a big deal. And I would only encourage that, when this work group, say, is no longer pertinent, I wouldn't stop. Like I think that's a big deal.
And we'll talk about that tomorrow. Well, first, I appreciate that, because we've honestly went into this in a good faith effort to fill that knowledge gap, both for how we draft up the rules and propose it, and also the report back to the legislature. And I mean, some of the report backs people might be against, but we'll make sure that everybody's voice is captured in everything that we do. But yeah, no, I think in closing tomorrow, we'll talk about how we're going to keep up the momentum with the stakeholder engagement on a yearly basis, whether it's working groups based around a single issue or it's pertaining to rules being drafted. But yeah, this is 2022 is going to be certainly no shortage of stakeholder engagement from our perspective, because we've certainly seen the value in it, although some have anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know that, there you go. Fair enough. It's all is good. That's the way life goes. So,
well, I appreciate the kind words. We will see you tomorrow.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Take care.
See you, Eric. Take care.